want to give a quick shout out to all my patrons. Thank you so much for all of the continued support. And I am done. Okay, so I just finished reading House of Earth and Blood. This is book 1 of Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas, and I want to give you my unedited thoughts on finishing this book, which was just right now. So, yeah, unsurprisingly, not a big fan of this one. I'm going to end up giving it 2 stars, which means I did not like it. Didn't hate it, though, which I guess is surprising, because I really did expect this to be one of the worst books that I ever read. I have so many preconceived notions about Sarah J. Maas, and I don't know if they were all totally undone or not. I almost feel like this book is a bit of an outlier for her, and the one I'd probably like the most, because it's not really like a romance-heavy kind of smut book. It's really just an attempt at being a big fantasy story, just not very well executed. I mean, there were some good parts of it. We'll talk about them, but so before we go too far into it, why did I read this book? So I feel like a lot of people would know and question, like, what is Matt doing here? Why is he reading this? And he's not going to like it. It's because somebody picked it for me. There's a lot of opportunities for my viewers to pick the books that I'm going to read in the upcoming month. The 2 kind of wild card ones are that if you're a member of my Patreon, you get to select a book, and then every month I spin a big wheel, and whatever it lands on, I have to read and review. And if you ever wondered if I cheat that and pick only books that I want to read, clearly I don't, because I landed on this, and I read it. And the other one is my TBR contest, where you guess how I'm going to rate the books, and if you win a couple times, then you get to pick a book. But this one was on the Patreon, and so I had to read it. And yeah, I'm disappointed because I liked the book at the beginning. I'd say about 100 pages into this book, I thought it was good, like 4 stars good. It was well done. I mean, the writing had a lot of problems right out of the gate. But the plot really drew me in. I mean, there is a thing that happens. I almost feel like I can ruin this because I feel like my viewers are not ever going to read this book. But I'm going to stick to non-spoilers here just in case. Because I might get some different viewers here if they're just searching for the title of this book. But there's something that happens in the first portion of the book that really hit me upside the head. It was extremely well done. Totally surprised me. I feel like it would make a lot of people angry what happened. But I was sitting there just cheering for it. I was like, yeah, for something that unexpected to happen, that totally upends the book, out of a book that I thought was going to have nothing of the sort, that was awesome. It did kind of dramatically change what was going on and the cast of characters and what they mean for the world. And I didn't love that, but I also loved it, if that makes sense, you know? I wish I could spoil it, but I'm not going to. But come talk to me in Discord. Hit the link down below in the description if you want to go in there, and I'll tell you what I mean. But yeah, right when that happened, I was like, this is great. I really like what's going on here. I can excuse the writing. But then we got the next portion of the book, the next 200 to 300 pages. This is a big boy. This is like 800, 900 pages. It was a massive info dump, and it was probably the biggest info dump that I've ever read in a fantasy book, which is saying something. And then it turned into a detective story with this slowly budding relationship story that you can see a mile away, that just moves at a snail's pace. And honestly, the romance part of this book was the thing that I feared the most, and it ended up being done decently well. And it was most certainly was not the thing that made me dislike this book. And by romance, you might be thinking like, oh, is he using a light term to describe like a lot of sex in the book? No, there's no sex in this book, at least none on camera. I mean, there's some references to it kind of behind the scenes at the beginning of the book, but nothing of the sort. It's just a slow, boy meets girl, and they develop a relationship with a very massive fantasy background there. And so, yeah, I was happily surprised when the romance here is really just, what you would expect out of a relationship in a fantasy book. These characters go from disliking each other to loving each other, not over the course of like 50 or 100 pages, which you see a lot in fantasy stories, but over the course of like 700 pages. That's not a bad way to do that kind of thing. And it ended up being one of the strengths of this book. Now, having said that, I'm not a big romance fan. And even though I can recognize that it wasn't a problem and it was handled well, for that to be the crux of the story doesn't really draw me as the reader in, Matt. Now, others it might, but we'll go into that a little bit more as I talk about some of my critiques of the book, and critiques that I suspect Sarah J. Maas fans probably have of this book, even though I don't really know much about Sarah J. Maas. But what made me dislike things here was the writing style of Sarah J. Maas. And I don't mean this to belittle anybody who likes this, because I certainly love many authors that could be described as having not great prose in their writing. I mean, look, I'm a big lit RPG fan that's kind of known for having pretty god-awful prose in many instances, and I can look beyond them because I love the plot so much and I like the characters so much that, I can excuse it. But I absolutely loathe the way that she writes sentences and the word choices that she uses. Now, I know this is oddly specific, but let me tell you a little bit what I mean here. So, there are so many things that I dislike about the way that she writes, and let's start from the top. Okay, so first, it's the way that every character is edgy. It's not like one character, like in Gideon the Ninth, that acts this way. It's literally every character to the point where they feel like carbon copies of each other. They're trying way, way, way too hard to be so cool, but not cool in the legitimate somebody I would want to hang out with cool. They're cool in the what you would expect out of an annoying teenager cool, which is very annoying to 38-year-old Matt, because I am well past that stage of my life and cringe when I think about that's how a lot of people acted. But it's the way they talk to each other. I mean, it's this prolific usage of curse words to show how cool they are that gets so grating to the point that it almost ends up being funny that you're like waiting for these moments to happen. I mean, the F word, and sorry, I know I sound like a kid here, but I don't want to get demonetized by cursing, and I don't really know who's watching my channel, if they're kids, and I want to keep this as PG as possible. But the F word is used 506 times in this book. What? Like, it's such a tired way of writing that it's boring. Like, I don't mind cursing in my stories. Look, The Lies of Locke Lamora is one of my favorite stories of all time. There is a lot of foul language in that story, but Scott Lynch actually varies what's said in a way that's not commonly used, and he does it in a way that's very funny, and he doesn't use the same terms over and over and over again, and it's brilliant. But using the F word that much just sucks. I have no way of confirming this because I'm just making a wild assumption here because I've done no background. But I got the sense, and I'm probably wrong, but I got the sense that Sarah J. Maas made some of the decisions she made here to silence specific criticisms people may have had with her writing. And maybe she's always done it like this, but it's almost as if people like criticized her for writing really YA style. And she's like, I know how to make this story more adult. Have the characters curse the entire time. Problem solved. Yeah, that's not how it works. And even if you do want to make them curse, at least make it interesting. It's just the same word, like literally more than every other page. That's nuts. I mean, the author also, strangely enough, uses the words male and female more than a lot. It's weird seeing this written once, but I looked it up, and she uses it 206 times in this book. It's so awkward, and I just cannot for the life of me understand how it's used so much. Now, I did hear, so on my Discord, I was talking to people when I was reading through this book, and I mentioned this, and somebody said, yeah, that's actually somewhat of a common thing in fantasy romance stories. I don't get it. That's weird. I just truly don't understand it. Other interesting statistics. The word hell comes up 165 times, not describing the location hell, but saying things like, this hurts like hell. There's a lot of examples like this. There's these terms in the story where it uses, like, in this one, it's not hell, H-E-L, it's H-E-L, because let's try to make it a little different because of the world here. It's just, it's very, very strange. They'd also use the phrase alpha holes because there's like werewolf type characters in the story. So like alpha dog, but alpha holes to mean ASS holes. It's weird. I didn't look up that one, but it's got to be used way over 100 times. It's just every page is littered with it, and it's boring the way it's written. Also, apparently she loves the word snarl. Not because like it's literal dogs doing it or even werewolves. It's like describing how a human like talks to another human. It comes up 108 times. Now, I can confidently say in my life, I've never said that word out loud describing anything before. So to see it that many times was just like, what? Over and over and over and over and over again. It's strange. So enough about the word use, the word choice. Let's go on to some other, substantive parts of this book. She starts off this book with an epic amount of world building. I was actually impressed with it. I mean, for someone that comes from epic fantasy, I was kind of wowed at the beginning of this. It really impressed me. I mean, and this is coming from an urban fantasy story with like a modern day urban fantasy story. And world building can be very bad in those books, or maybe not bad, just non-existent, because it just takes a real world location and just says, okay, now there's some magic in it and everything else is the same. I'm looking at you like Dresden Files. Where it's not, I don't want to say bad, it's just, it's Chicago with, fantasy characters in it. This is not. Totally different world, totally different background. And I've never actually seen somebody so ambitiously craft a world like this out of the gate from something like a urban fantasy. But she ruins this strong start by giving constant info dumps, and not from characters talking with each other, but through this narrator, what is it called? Omniscient narrator, just telling the reader about everything, that it just becomes a chore to read. It made me literally fall asleep a few times while I was reading this late at night. And all of the world building takes place over like 200 pages. I mean, there's some littered here and there, where we are basically told the entire history of this world while other smaller events are going on. It's like characters will be talking, something will go on, somebody will mention something, and then the narrator will pop in and tell, 5 pages of background about that one thing. It's weird. It doesn't really help the story in any way. Like, why do I care who ruled this world 1,000 years ago when it literally has no relevance to anything that happens in the current story? It's needless. And why am I just being shovel-fed this information instead of dripped the info in a show-don't-tell kind of way? Again, going back to my previous comment, it's almost as if Sarah J. Maas said, I'm writing fantasy, and people say I need more world building in my fantasy. I'll add in hundreds and hundreds of boring backstory to the world. Problem solved. That's not how it works, Sarah. I'm sorry. And again, maybe this is what she does on all her stories. It just felt odd and forced and way, way, way overdone, which sucks because it did start off promising. And if she went in that direction, it would have been really solid. Also, every single character here, and I'm not exaggerating at all, is described as being extremely attractive. Now, I get this is probably something in fantasy stories. I don't read them. But it's just weird. It pulls me out of the story and makes it feel like I'm reading a book made for a teenager. I mean, these characters don't have physical flaws. And most of the time, they don't really have any personality flaws. And they're insanely skilled at whatever their craft is. And they're just like super people in every way. And everyone's attracted to everybody else. And everyone is amazing. And it makes me... I don't need to know how the women in this book have perfectly formed breasts every other page. I don't need to know how every man in this book has, these amazingly toned muscles. I know, Sarah, you've hit me over the head with this 100 times. I get it. What makes me love characters is when they have flaws. It doesn't matter what they're flawed in, but I do need a character to have major deficiencies in order for them to become interesting. And this describes no characters in the book because they are all perfect. The plot. Now, again, I said it started off hot. It had these weird hiccups. It turned into a detective story. The problem with the detective story, and I don't mind them in stories, in fact, they can be done very well. I read The Justice of Kings earlier this year, which is a detective story at heart, and I thoroughly loved it. But this detective story didn't progress. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages without really learning more about what's going on. And it ends in a way that doesn't even solve things. I mean, there's this council that has to get together. I forgot the term of it, but all these important people have to get together and have a meeting. And this is brought up in one of the very first chapters. And you're like, oh, that'll be interesting to see. And then I'm reading 100 more pages and I'm like, yeah, when's that council meeting going to happen? That'll be interesting when that finally happens. I want the action to happen. And then another 100 and another 100 and another 100. It didn't come up till the end of the book. Again, this is like a 900-page book. It's a snail's pace. I get the sense that this is really meant to be a slow budding romance story. And all this other stuff is just background for it. It's just thrown in for some reason. I don't get it. Maybe it's to sell more. Maybe, does that sell more? Does this book sell more than a normal romance story? Probably. Maybe it brings in more people. But it didn't, it fell off. And ultimately just kind of ruined the book for me. So, you know, I know I'm saying a lot of negative here. And why didn't I give it a 1 star? I didn't hate it. There had a lot of promise here. It started off so good that I can't give it a 1 star. And I finished it. I mean, I kind of had to finish it because on the books where people pick it for me, I always finish them. The only stuff I DNF is like when I choose to do it. When I choose to pick up the book, I'll do it. But I feel bad because, you know, it's just who I am. But I did finish it. Never hated it. I just wanted so much more to come out of it. And I'm left here feeling like, again, it's like Sarah decided to write something different. I feel like her fans will probably not love this one, or I'm sure they'll read it. I mean, I'm a Sanderson fan. I'll buy all his books. I'm not going to love every book of his, but I'll still buy the next ones, even if I don't like one. I mean, I didn't like Mr. War and Era 2. I'm still going to go buy Stormlight the moment it comes out. I still bought the Secret Projects as soon as they came out. I get the sense this is probably the same with the Sarah J. Maas fans, because it's probably different than what they're expecting. The Sarah J. Maas fans are probably expecting more smut in their books, you know, a lot more sex in the books, probably less world building, probably, you know, I don't know. I can't speak for it because I'm not a Sarah J. Maas. Oops. Anyways, I can't speak for it because I'm not a Sarah J. Maas fan. But in any case, who would I recommend this book for? I don't know. I think I recommend it for Sarah J. Maas fans, I guess. That's it. I mean, I can't recommend this to anybody because I feel like nobody I know would like this. There's a lot of people that love it. I know a lot of people that love it. You know, in my personal life, you know, my wife's friends have all read it and love Sarah J. Maas books. So I guess I'd recommend it to somebody, probably a woman, not to be sexist, but probably a woman who likes romance stories that I want to get more into fantasy. And I'll be like, oh, this is the hook. You know, this will get you into them. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about, but all right, I'm done. I don't have to think about this book anymore. Moving on to bigger and better things, and that's it for me. So thank you so much for watching, and as always, happy reading to you. Thanks again to all my patrons, with a special shout out to my Ascendant tier and Librarian tier patrons: Anna G, CJ, Doust, Darren, Gregory, Jonathan, Nathan T, Nev's Book Channel, 𝐿, Ron Reich, Russell, Ryan L, Sydney Baker, Tay C, Tahir, Anna, Andra, Blair, Brock, Evan, Fanixan, Harry B, Joe, Cat Mick, Michael Sugarman, Sky, TW57, Wacky, and Zion. Thanks for sticking to the end of this video, and if you want to watch some more content from my channel, click over here and I've got some good videos for you. Thanks so much.